Yeah, okay. So good morning, everyone. Once again, a big thank you, everyone, for joining in Saturday morning for Indian folks and South Asia host. And thank you, big thank you to Ali and folks who have joined late the time zone. I know, like Friday night, and many folks have their plans out there. Dreamforce, whether it is family time, so it's mean really a lot. You are spending this 1 hour with us. We are at day three for Slack admin certification. So earlier two sessions we have conducted on last 2 weekends, and recording is available if at all you are not able to make it to those sessions. I will provide the link as well. Today's session is all about user lifecycle management and access control, and this session is in collaboration with Pride Force. So Pride Force is an initiative, as many of you know, is it provides the Salesforce related product trainings and personality development trainings to LGBTQI plus community plus allies. So big thank you to Pride Force team for collaborating with us. So, as the tradition goes, we always make sure that we have something in place for the folks or the equality of the community, and we speak as much as possible for the human rights. So, equality doesn't really gives everyone the same seat, but it's making sure that every seat reaches the table. So as much as we speak on this, the better reach would be, and we are making it this as a norm. With further ado, let me welcome Ali again. A very big thank you for joining in last minute. I know you you are super occupied with all your earlier commitment. So a warm welcome from Salesforce Vadarba community. And Ali needs no introduction. She is a marketing champion and this year's Salesforce MVP as well. She is a Slack community leader and senior manager delivery. So a warm welcome, Ali, to you. And with further ado, I will just hand it over to you. And a couple of slides I will take once you wrap up the session.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm super happy to be here with everyone. Let me share the right screen, hopefully. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Okay, so yeah, like you said, I'm Ali Wagisback. I work at Brid. We're a Slack first Salesforce consultancy. I'm based in Louisiana in the US, but our team is globally distributed across the world. So I am pretty used to being up kind of late. I will turn my camera off in just a second though, because it is pretty late at night for me. But I'm super excited to join you all and talk about user access management and control. I think you all met with Nicole Pomponio in the last session to talk about channels and access and things like that. Her and I have a session we'll be presenting at Dreamforce about the Slack admin exam and how to pass the exam. So this is something I'm super passionate about, been speaking about for a while, and I'm really excited to talk to all of you about the user section of it. But with that said, if you ever have any questions, if you have tried to take the test and haven't passed just yet, or you just need a little bit of extra support, I'm always happy to hop on a Zoom call, a huddle in the Slack community, whatever you need. I'm super passionate about getting other folks Slack certified. Um, Outside of that, let's hop into user access management. So we're going to talk a lot about how users get created, what kind of users you see inside of Slack, what those people can't do, what the scopes of their roles look like. So really, I'm just going to say this is kind of the shape of our hour on one slide. So the 7 stages where every single user in every Slack org passes through them in this order. So provisioning, where an account gets created, routing, where we land them in the right places, scoping, so the access that person has, whether a member, a guest, or an external user, the authentication that user needs to get through to get into our org, the groups that that user might be a part of, the authorization that user needs, so their role and permission level, and then offboarding, when people leave our org or no longer part of who we need to be connected to. So the exam tests kind of these gates more than the features, but you do still need to understand kind of like in depth the overall features of how people move through these stages. So there are 5 ways a Slack account can come into existence, and this is, I'd say, a pretty important one for every admin. And my power just kind of blinked a little, so if I get disconnected, hopefully you can still hear me. Um,
Yeah.
but there, can you still hear me?
Yes, Ali, you
Okay,
you
great.
are here.
Okay, so there are 5 ways that a Slack account can come into existence. So through a manual invite where an admin is inviting people one at a time. So more manual when I just maybe have a smaller org or I just need to invite a new hire where the invitee then accepts that through an emailed link. I can invite people through a CSV upload. So an admin can do that in batches. I can do it through SSO and SAML, which we'll talk about a little bit later through my identity provider, and you'll see identity provider abbreviated as IDP throughout this presentation. SCIM provisioning, again, through my identity provider, and then just-in-time provisioning. So that's a user gets it provisioned on their first successful SSO sign-in. So just-in-time is on-demand provisioning when the user gets set up. So SSO on its own is not a provisioning method. It's an authentication method, but it is a way that kind of we get people into Slack through SAML with SSO. So mail invites are the simplest method there is. You type in somebody's email, Slack sends them a link, and they sign up. That works on all of the plans, including the free plans, but it doesn't really scale because someone has to sit there and do it one at a time. So you're copy pasting every email in, you're sending those out. CSV upload is the batch version of exactly the same thing. So instead of typing the addresses out, you upload a file of emails, and Slack sends invites to all those folks at once. Still fundamentally manual, but it just saves you the repetitive typing. So the same permissions, the same behavior. Inside of Enterprise, there is a toggle that can be set for requiring admin approval to toggle on invitations. So when we turn that on, regular members can request to invite someone, but an admin still has to approve it before the invite actually goes out. So we can have some governance controls in place for these where if we want to have folks able to invite someone and have that kind of open invite to anyone that they want to add to the org, totally fine. Or we can have it with some approvals in place where someone could absolutely invite a contractor, a new hire, et cetera, but an admin needs to authenticate that that is a real person with the right email and the right permissions and everything else that they need that before they get the invite to join the org. So none of these methods create any connection between Slack and your HR system, your identity provider, anything like that. These are just super manual methods to get people into the system. So if we're provisioning them manually, we have to offboard them manually. So if you're thinking about this outside of just, studying for the exam and you're maybe thinking about, your own org, think about the volume of people that are joining your org on a given week. Or over time, how many people are in your org, how many people will be in your org. You really have to think about volume when you're thinking about the best method for provisioning folks in. And because of how the manual methods works, we don't want to have orphaned accounts. We want to have people like onboard and offboard in a more automated fashion. And that's why the exam and the content that you see in the Slack help docs and the Slack training steers you towards SCIM in scenarios that mention offboarding. So the 3 methods tied to identity providers are SSO, SAML, SCIM, and just-in-time provisioning. So kind of take these one at a time. So SSO using SAML lets people log into Slack using their company identity through something like Okta, Microsoft Intra, Google Workspace. On its own, SAML only handles authentication. It proves who somebody is. It doesn't create the account. It doesn't clean up when they leave. But SCIM provisioning has IDP, which can push accounts into Slack before their first login. It can remove the IDP person from Slack by deactivating them when they're removed from the IDP. We can also create user groups in Skim provisioning. This is super important if your customer has enterprise, or if you're saying, to admin enterprise, and most of the exam focuses heavily on enterprise grid. When we think about Skim and groups, we want to think about, maybe we have a company that's quite large and they've got a marketing team, a sales team, a finance team, maybe a service team, and they all have separate workspaces under that enterprise grid. Using Skim provisioning, we can push folks into the right workspaces, the right channels, the right place that they need to be based on the information that we get back from the IDP. So maybe they've got like Active Directory or Intra or some other provider where we can get some of that information about the team they belong to, where they need to be pushed into, and then we can use Skim to push them into the right place and provision them accurately without having to have those manual processes. And then just in time is just what it sounds like. It is just in time provisioning. So the account is created at the moment the first successful SSO sign in. So default behavior when SSO is configured with or without Skim, and acts as a fallback. So if someone signs in before Skim finishes provisioning them, just in time creates the account anyway. So if we think about a company, maybe like Amazon, and I've got an ally@amazon.com email, I can make sure everyone who tries to sign up with an Amazon.com email can get provisioned with just-in-time provisioning. So when I go to sign up with my ally@Amazon email on my first day, even if it hasn't been pushed from the IDP just yet, I should be able to sign up and get my account created automatically. So which method works on which plan? I do want to take a little bit of time to look at this because it is important. Even though the exam does focus on enterprise, when you're talking to customers, they might not be on enterprise, right? In the real world, they might be on Business Plus, thinking about migrating to enterprise. They might be on Pro. They might even be on Free, and just kind of thinking about how they want to use Slack, what they want to use it for. So when we're looking at the free plan, we can manually invite our CSV upload. Same for Pro. There's a lot of options for user access control in the free and the Pro plan. But when we get up to Business Plus, we can now have SAML SSO just in time and Skim provisioning set up. So we can get those set up on the Business Plus plan, which is super helpful for some larger organizations, just to be able to manage the volume of users. And then when we talk about enterprise, SSO is a requirement for enterprise. I've run into this all the time with customers who want to upgrade to enterprise for the first time. They're migrating from Pro or Business Plus, and they're not using SSO anywhere. Their org, they maybe have Google, and maybe they use Google to sign in to, one or two other things, maybe their email they SSO into, but they're not really using SSO with any level of fidelity. So then we need to have a larger conversation about what SSO we're going to use, how we're going to implement this, because again, SSO is a requirement for enterprise being set up. You can't even migrate a business or pro workspace into enterprise if SSO is not configured for at least a single user. So it's super important to know that those are available in enterprise, and then Skim can create multi-channel guests, and then IDP groups to sync to workspaces is available on enterprise. So using a Skim to create or deactivate multi-channel guests specifically, again, only available on enterprise. And then being able to sync those groups like we talked about is also an enterprise only feature. So let's put that table to work. Two scenarios, same company, same plan, and we'll resolve them a little bit differently. So in scenario A, they're on Business Plus, and HR wants full employees auto-created on hire and auto-deactivated on termination, driven entirely from the identity provider. Does that work? Yes. Skim handles both provisioning and deprovisioning of full members on Business Plus. If your instinct was no, they need enterprise grid, then that's the myth we just corrected, right? We can have Skim, as we see here, in Business Plus for provisioning and deprovisioning users. In scenario B, same company, same plan, but now they want contractors auto-provision as multi-channel guests through that same feed. Does that work? It doesn't, right? Skim guest creation is enterprise only. So that's the part that separates being able to answer some of the more nuanced questions on the exam. Um, is this kind of scenario where we have, business plus for both of these, but two kind of slightly different needs from the same company on the same plan. So understanding that chart and that table is super important as you're studying for the exam, because you might see questions like this where we've got, scenario B and you think, well, I know Skim is available in Business Plus, so I'm going to say, yeah, we can totally do that, except that Skim multi-channel guest creation is not available on Business Plus. So again, really study the tables that show you the capabilities across all the features inside of Slack, not just these user features. But understanding kind of what is available in each plan will really help you for a lot of these scenario-based questions where you have to spend a little bit more time thinking through what's possible, what's best practice. Also, there's a lot to kind of go on there. So go to the next one. So getting someone an account is only half the job. An account is not entirely access. So we've got somebody set up. They're in our org. They've accepted the invite, but now we need to kind of look at these other levers that we can pull to make sure that folks are where they need to be. So the first lever is default channels. So we set that at the workspace level, and every new member gets auto added into these channels when they join. So this applies no matter how they're provisioned, mail, invite, skim, just in time. All of that doesn't matter. They all hit the same default channel list. One of the ways that I really like to use this with my customers is having onboarding workflows ready to go when folks get added to Slack for the first time. So if we're thinking about, we're going to onboard 500 people, maybe we have a workflow that kind of walks them through some of our Slack norms and our Slack etiquette for our org as soon as they join the new Slack onboarding channel. And we can have that channel there for everyone who joins the company for all the time to then, trigger that workflow and be sent those reminders, those updates over whatever period of time, where we then kind of show them all of our Slack etiquette guide without having to push them somewhere outside of Slack to go read kind of, more boring document. The other lever that we can pull is workspace access settings that controls whether people in our org can even find a workspace, let alone join it. So if you think about, if I kind of go back to, let's see if I can go back here. Oh, let me pull up the workspace.
Meanwhile, you pull, Ali, we have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so question from Shanti. Can you please explain exact difference between GIT and scam?
Yeah. So just in time provisioning will be as soon as, let me go back here. So they just in time an account is created at the moment that a first successful sign on, SSO sign on happens. So Skim can maybe take a little bit of time to provision. So you can have both of those happening at the same time, where Skim has an IDP push the accounts into Slack before they log in for the first time. So if you think about maybe you have Microsoft Intra set up where we have everybody coming in through Intra, and that's, they've got Outlook and they've got their Outlook, Microsoft Calendar and things like that. We've got them all set up in Intra. Intra IDP will push into Slack and then provision an account before a person even logs in for the first time. But there's, like a bit of a gap and a delay there. Just in time means that I can have an account created at the moment the person signs in successfully. So if I send them my domain for my enterprise org and they go to log in for the first time, then they're automatically provisioned on that first sign in using Intra or whatever my SSO provider is.
Thanks for answering, Ali.
Yeah, hopefully that explains it. Sorry, I'm trying to get this other.
Okay, so can we take one more or?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so we have question from Pawan. Okay, so I have question around the routing stage. If default channel apply to everyone regardless of how they are provisioned, what you recommend for a large enterprise grade organization whether different department need different onboarding channels? Would you use IDP groups and workspace level configuration for that, or is there a better Slack native approach? And are there any exam scenarios where we need to distinguish between default channel membership and access actually being granted to the workspace? Quite a long one.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll take that in parts. For default channels, you can, for a larger org, it kind of depends on what the enterprise design looks like. So do we have them, like I said earlier, where marketing and finance and sales and legal are all in separate workspaces? Then that workspace has its default channels, and that's kind of, a straightforward solution. If we've got maybe everyone in one workspace, maybe we're just getting started in Slack, we don't want to have multiple workspaces just yet, we can have different default channels for different groups. You can use IDP groups, or you can use groups in Slack. For the last part, whether there are any exam scenarios, I can't say for certainty whether there are any exam scenarios where you'll need to distinguish between the two. I would say probably not, but that doesn't mean that that a question like that couldn't pop up on the exam. Okay, so let me drag this into the right place. Oop, here. So when we talk about workspace access settings, that also matters because that controls whether org members can find and join a workspace at all. So if we take a look at this grid sandbox, we've got a bunch of workspaces in here. And you'll see that there are some that say launch in Slack for me, but then there are a bunch of others that say view details. So that means that these are closed and probably invite only versus ones that are public and available for me to join. So that workspace access setting controls who can find and who can join a workspace. So if I go to the next one, so there are 4 different workspace visibility scenarios that you'll need to understand for the exam. So an open workspace means that people can see it in that workspace launcher. Anybody can have access to it and see the various workspaces and join it. So that's the lowest amount of admin overhead. Typically, you'd want to use this for open company-wide workspaces, or if your company only has a single workspace enterprise. By request means that users can see that it exists, but they cannot join without approval. So this has a lot of admin overhead because it means that people can see the workspaces there. They might be curious about the workspace, what's in it, what channels are people talking about. So more likely to click on it and try to join, which means you have more admin overhead with having to approve people to be able to join that workspace. So think about that's more for departmental workspaces, like that finance, marketing, sales, service kind of thing. Invite only. People can see that it exists, but there's no join option shown, so they can't even try to join themselves. So that's kind of in the middle on admin overhead. So that's more, I wouldn't even think about that for maybe like a leadership workspace, or I would think about more like a product specific workspace or project specific workspace. And then the hidden setting, no one can see it exists. They can't try to add themselves. And I would say that's more for like legal, M&A, very sensitive information. So maybe your company is getting ready to acquire another company and you only want a couple people from leadership in each company even know that that workspace exists. You want to use the hidden setting to be able to hide that away from folks. So there are 2 guest roles available in Slack, and the difference between those 2 is the channel count and the cost. So this is a big one when you're thinking about scenarios on the exam, because you'll want to go with whatever is the best option for the company that's in the scenario, right? So a single channel guest has access to exactly one channel and one channel only, with not that I can think of off the top of my head, any kind of caveat there, right? So like it has to be one channel only. So to kind of dive a little bit deeper into how that is free, you only get 5 single channel guests per paid active member. So if I have 25 um, paid active members in my org, then I get 125 free single channel guests, right? So it's just the number of active members I have times 5. Um, you can have those on any paid plan, and they'll have a different profile icon next to their profile. They'll have a little triangle that shows that they're a single channel guests, and they can't browse workspaces. You can add them to a private channel, but again, only just the one private channel. So for multi-channel guests, they can be added to 2 or more channels, so that they can be added to an unlimited number of channels, but they are billed as a full user. So ideally, if a person really only needs to be in one channel, you'll add them as a single channel guest. If they need to be, I would say, maybe 3 or more, right? 2, I feel like you can maybe figure out a way to get them all into one channel. Otherwise, you're being billed for that full seat. And as we all know, on enterprise, that can become a little pricey because there is no free allowance for multi-channel guests. They'll have a square next to their profile icon, and it can be added to private channels. Just taking a look at some questions in the chat. Can the visibility setting be changed later by request to open? Yes, you can change that later. Why doesn't Slack show up when we click on a user, which channels they have access to? You can see that as an admin in the admin panel, like which channel someone is in. You can do like an export for a channel membership audit. What would be the validity, the access time period on guests, as well as multi-channel guests? That's totally dependent on how long you want to let that person have access.
Great, thanks, Ali.
Yeah. Okay, so there are 2 ways to work with outsiders. So people who are outside of your organization, and they have pretty, I would say, specific use cases for either one. So guest accounts exist inside your workspace, and you can have, again, single or multi-channel guests. So think about contractors, like freelancers, auditors, maybe someone who, it just needs to be in the org for just a little bit of time. They can have a guest account, and it's either free for a single channel guest or billed for multi-channel. And your security policies do apply to those folks. So 2FA and session duration policies apply to anyone who is a guest in your instance. For Slack Connect, that's a little different. So you think about maybe if Brid needed to connect to the Amazon company, and I needed to have a conversation with Jeff Bezos, we could have a Slack Connect channel between Brid and Amazon, and that could be existing inside our own workspaces. So the channels are shared at a no per person cost. Those are best for partners, vendors, clients, things like that. At Brid, we have Slack Connect channels with all of our clients, so we can constantly be in contact with them. So Slack Connect is super helpful to have. And the security policies are governed by the connection settings of the org that owns and created the channel. So another thing to call out there. I see that there's another question. So for a contractor who needs access to multiple channels, I would choose a multi-channel guest over a single channel guest, and those licensing costs are just the ones we kind of looked at, where they would be billed as a full member rather than free. Okay, so there are 2 attributes that you need to think about for the SAML handshake, if you will. So when you configure SSO, there are 2 pieces of information that Slack will need from your IDP on every single sign-in: the name ID and an email address. So name ID is a unique string that the IDP assigns to each person. It has to be unique, pseudo-random, and stable over time. So think like an employee ID number, or a random string that's assigned to that person that will not change over time. Um, and then the email, which is just what it sounds like, that person's email address, which must be valid and unique. So how Slack matches on sign-in: SAML response arrives with name ID and email. Slack looks for an existing account matching either attribute. When the match is found, the user is signed in. And if there's no match, then a new account is created through just-in-time provisioning, and both values are stored. I see there's another question in the chat. So can removing a permission set revoke a user's access control to a record in Slack? Users should remove a permission set to a sales team. I'm not 100% sure that I understand that question. So if Slack and Salesforce are connected, Slack just follows the permissions that they have in Salesforce. So if you remove the permission set inside Salesforce, it will revoke their access to visualize that record inside of Slack. I think that's the question, but if that's not the question, then let me know. If an external contractor needs access to 3 specific channels for a limited time period, I would recommend a multi-channel guest, unless they are using Slack. It kind of just depends on the contractor. So I know I've worked with some contractors who don't use Slack. They're like on Teams, so we just add them as a multi-channel guest. But I've also worked with contractors who have their own company, and then they have a paid Slack plan, and we add them as Slack Connect. It just kind of depends there. If we're working with an external vendor for a few months, needing access to multiple channels, what factors should an admin consider? I think that's the same question, but let me know if you have other kind of questions outside of that one. I think that's the same answer, though. It just depends on if they're already using Slack or not, what kind of channels they would need access to. For Slack Connect versus guest accounts, how does the ownership of the channel affect security policies? And in what scenario would you recommend Slack Connect instead of creating guest accounts? So Slack Connect follows whichever org owns the channel. So in that case, if I have a Slack Connect channel with Salesforce, for example, perhaps they have a policy setting where I can't, they've set up the channel where I can't add other people from Brid, right? But if I set up the channel, I might have it set so that people from Salesforce can add other folks. So there are some security scenarios around Slack Connect, and it just kind of follows whoever made the channel. So SSO setup, where it lives, what you paste in. So in Business Plus, it's at the workspace level. In an enterprise org, it's at the org level. Enterprise orgs can run up to 11 additional SSO configurations for multiple IDPs. So if I'm making some acquisitions, and one of my acquisitions is on Intra, we're on Okta, another acquisition on Google, I can have multiple SSO configurations while I get my entire company kind of aligned on a single SSO. The other nice thing about enterprise is that I can have SSO bypass, and that's an important thing that I think maybe doesn't pop up on the exam, but it will pop up in working with customers. Maybe you have a customer who most of the folks in their enterprise org are contractors, right? But they're full members of the org because they need to be in a lot of channels. And they're using their personal Gmail because they are, a fitness coach or whatever. Let's just say they're all, fitness coaches, right? They're using their personal or their own personal business email address, right? So I can have an SSO bypass for all of those folks. You can run scripts to bypass all those folks from SSO, but at least one person must be set up with SSO in enterprise. So that is a full requirement on the enterprise side. The way kind of around a little bit of that is workspace owners and org owners can always sign in with an email and password, even when SSO is required. That's built in. You don't need a separate kind of break glass admin account there. they'll always be able to log in. So make sure that you have, one or two admins who are workspace owners, org owners, and as those people leave the company, you're rotating that out to a new set of folks as well. So once SSO is running, the next question is how you keep membership in sync without an admin manually adding and removing people all day. That's what IDP groups do. So this is an enterprise only feature like we kind of talked about. So you connect a group from your IDP provider to a workspace. And from that moment on, anyone added to that group in the IDP is automatically added to the workspace. So anyone removed from the group is also automatically removed from the workspace. So it's a live ongoing sync and not a one-time import. You can do the same thing to channels. So channels can either be org-wide multi-workspace channels or reachable from a workspace where membership is required. Otherwise, you can't connect a group to them, but you can have channels that are set as default for specific groups. So all membership changes must be made in the IDP just to keep that in sync rather than inside of Slack. So there are two things on the slide to note. So one is a toggle that you should understand, and the other is a button that you should maybe be a little wary of. The toggle is to make membership required. You'll find it on the workspace tab of a connected group. So turning it on enforces that everyone in the IDP group stays in that workspace and Slack doesn't let them drift out. There's a side effect worth noting because it generates help desk tickets. If a workspace is added via an IDP group, Slack treats it as a default workspace and the person can't leave it on their own. So they might come to you saying, I can't leave this workspace, and then fix is actually in the IDP group and not inside of Slack. So there's the warning box, from Slack's documentation that disconnecting an IDP group from a workspace will automatically remove all the members from that group in that workspace. So not paused, not suspended, they will be removed. If you disconnect a group of 400 people from a workspace, 400 people will lose access immediately. So that's just really important to note that disconnecting that IDP group will remove all those folks from that workspace. And yep, yes, I think that's the answer to the question there as well. Okay, so there are two things I kind of talked a little bit about at the start with IDP groups versus user groups. The names are similar and the functions are a little bit different. So an IDP group is created in your identity provider and available in enterprise only, and it's really meant to auto-manage workspace and channel membership. So like an Okta group that's called engineering auto adds folks to the engineering workspace. And then Slack user groups are created inside Slack and available on Business Plus and above. And the primary purpose of that one is to mention people at once or grant access to certain channels and things in bulk. And that membership is managed in Slack or via Skim. So if you think about engineering, design team, it's a way to mention all of those folks in that group or to add them to a specific set of channels all at once. So the exam gives you a requirement in plain English and a configuration and asks whether the configuration satisfies the requirement. So let's say that everyone on the support team must be reachable with a single mention and must have access to these three channels, right? Support tier 1, support tier 2, and support escalations. So does the group contain exactly the required people, not more, not fewer? And does the group grant access to all three named channels? So we want to think about, is this a IDP group or is this a Slack group? This would be a Slack group because we're going to have everyone be reachable with a single mention and then auto add them to those specific channels using that group. And I see there's another question. So for the exam, the easiest way to remember when to use an IDP group versus a Slack user group, I would say when you want to manage workspace and channel membership versus when you want to be able to mention people or give them access to a specific channel in bulk. So definitely this primary purpose line is the best way to remember the difference between the two. That's kind of the key difference, other than one is managed in the IDP and the other is managed inside of Slack. So we do want to talk a little bit about offboarding because that is a relevant exam topic. So deactivation signs a person out of all their devices immediately, removes them from the channels, blocks any future sign-in, but it doesn't delete their messages or their files, doesn't delete their profile information, and does not notify the person that they've been deactivated. So I know, when I have left some companies before, on my last day, my user gets deactivated, but people can certainly go back and still search for messages with me, see projects we've talked about. All that context doesn't disappear. It stays there. My messages are still there, but I'm just deactivated. Deleting a profile is a separate act, so that's only available after the account is deactivated. Only a primary owner can do it, and it is irreversible. So the message content stays, but it's going to show that it's from a deleted user. So who can deactivate who? I know we only have about like 15 minutes left, and I've got about 9 slides. So I'm not going to dive too deep into this matrix, but I'll make sure the slides get shared out after this. But we think about who can deactivate who. A workspace admin can deactivate members and guests. An owner can deactivate everyone that an admin can, and an admin, and then a primary owner can deactivate all of the below or above rather, and a workspace owner. So it kind of just, branches down to whatever is below that level. No one can deactivate a org primary owner or workspace primary owner. The role must be transferred first. If you are in consulting, this might be something that you run into when you're going to migrate someone to enterprise. You'll need access to the workspace primary owner, and maybe they've left the company and their account is still in there. You have to go through a ticketing process with Slack to get that transferred over. So definitely, if your org or workspace primary owner leaves your company, be proactive before they're gone to have them submit a ticket to Slack support to transfer that primary ownership over to another person inside your company, because it is kind of a pain to get that done once they are gone. So kind of an offboarding run book. If a person's a primary owner, like I said, transfer the primary owner role first. Then for enterprise only, we want to deactivate that person at the org level, or if they're changing teams internally, just remove them from whatever workspace, or use IDP groups to move them between workspaces. And then not a big deal, but just handing off private channel ownership or making sure that the right folks get added to private channels before they're gone. Then you can deactivate them, and then if need be, profile deletion, which is not necessarily a requirement unless that's a compliance requirement from that client's legal team. So 2FA is in Slack is off by default, but anyone can turn that on for themselves. But owners and admins can make it mandatory for everyone. Workspace owners and admins, like org owners and admins, will need to use 2FA. That does get turned on for them, but for regular users, that has to be enabled by the admins. So the moment you enable it, everyone will get an email and a Slack bot message telling them to sign up. And then if they have not completed that within the kind of 24-hour, I think, or so window, they'll get signed out and they won't be able to sign back in until they complete 2FA setup. So new members must set up 2FA before creating their account when you have that turned on, and there's not a grace period for those folks. So a big thing to remember as an admin is to make sure people are saving their backup codes when they set up for 2FA. So there'll be an option for them to print or copy codes. I always recommend that folks put that along with their passwords and their password manager, just to make sure they always have access to their 2FA to reset it. So there's not really a self-service recovery path. If people run into that, a workspace owner or admin has to go into the member's account in the admin panel and manually disable 2FA for them, and then they have to set it up again. You can audit who has 2FA enabled by going into the workspace setting and just checking there who has 2FA set up. So we can talk a little about permissions at the workspace level. So the workspace primary owner is kind of the top level permission in the org. There is one workspace primary owner per workspace, but you can have multiple workspace owners in a workspace. But those folks can't delete the workspace or transfer ownership, and they can't approve an intent to migrate when that's sent from an enterprise org to migrate a business or pro org. So you'll want to make sure, like I said, to make sure the workspace primary owner is always someone who is currently employed by your company, and if they're leaving, that they transfer it to a different workspace owner in the org. The workspace admin has access to manage members channels and day-to-day settings, but they don't have access to your billing and can't set retention policies. Members have full product access, but no admin access. And then we've kind of talked a little bit about multi-channel and single channel guests and what they have access to. Another permission is the channel manager that kind of layers on top of these. So that's auto-assigned to whomever creates a channel. They can rename, archive, convert a channel from between public and private, and add up to 100 other channel managers for that channel, and they must be a member of the channel. Invited members, so those are folks who are invited but haven't accepted yet, can be added to channels, mentioned and DM'd, and they'll receive email notifications until they create the account. I think I see a couple questions. Let's see. If a deactivated user needs to return to the org later, yes, their account can be reactivated. If an organization has multiple workspaces, the best way to control users, which users can access each workspace, it would be the IDP groups for sure. Otherwise, it's a manual process. So enterprise adds a layer to these permissions with the org primary owner, the org owner, and org admin. So same kind of setup here where the org primary owners, there's a single one per org. They have access to system roles and channel management tools by default. The org owner has the same perms as the org primary owner, but they can't transfer ownership and they do not get system roles or channel management tools by default. And the org admin can manage org level settings, policies, and administrative tasks. And then there are some system built roles like the security admin, so that lets people manage an org security features. There's an AI admin. There's quite a few system roles in here. If we go to roles. So these are considered system roles like analytics admin, audit log admin, TLP admin for data loss prevention, security, Salesforce admin, etc. And then you can create custom roles on enterprise only. So it's built to delegate specific tasks without granting bucket access. So I might maybe want to create a custom role where maybe I can add some permissions here, and you have quite a few permissions you can choose from. Maybe I need a combination of, a Salesforce admin and audit log admin, but they don't need all of the scopes that are available in those. I can create a custom role here for that. So we want to, as always in Salesforce and Slack world, go with the least privilege. So we always want to give people the least amount of access that they need to be able to do their job. I certainly wouldn't want someone who just started tomorrow as just, maybe like, a junior project manager to have org owner access of our production Slack instance, right? We want to follow the practice of least privilege. So there's some scenarios here, but we can kind of just read through one or two. But so maybe someone needs to manage the security settings, but nothing else. We certainly want to promote that person to org admin, but we can give them the security admin system role. Maybe this person needs to archive and rename their team's channels. We don't want to make them the workspace admin. Maybe we want to just give them channel manager access on those few channels. So again, that'll be something that pops up on the exam. Always go with the least privilege possible. And certainly don't, go giving people org admin and workspace admin access willy-nilly. So domain claiming, I think we're kind of close to the end here. Domain claiming prevents people from creating unsanctioned workspaces using your company email domain. I see this a lot with my customers, where they have people who have set up dozens and dozens and dozens of workspaces on their domain, and they're all kind of rogue workspaces not managed by the company, and people are having conversations that legal doesn't have access to you, and their larger IT team doesn't have access to you. Domain claiming means that if I domain claim for Brid.io, no one can make an unsanctioned workspace using my company's email domain. So it also makes sure orgs connected workspaces easier for employees to find, and controls which orgs your members can accept Slack Connect invitations from. There's a little write up here on the side about how that works, but really for the exam, you just really need to know what and why you would use domain claiming. So before claiming, anyone with a company email can create a new Slack workspace. Those workspaces are invisible to IT. There's no retention. Like I said, there's no data governance. There's no access for legal hold. And they appear in employee sign-in lists alongside any sanctioned workspaces, which can be problematic. But after claiming, the new workspace creation on that domain is blocked, and they're redirected to contact their org admin. Existing workspace on that domain are not part of the enterprise drop down sign-in list, and sanctioned workspaces become easier to discover once we have domain claiming set up. And that is it for me. I do want to thank you all. I know it's early on your end, late on my end, but I was super excited to meet up with everyone. Super excited for this collaboration with Pride Force, especially. I'm happy to answer some questions, or if you want to ever, reach out to me on LinkedIn or by email, I'm happy to do that too.
Great. Thanks, Ali. We have three questions. Can we take that?
Yeah. Um, Okay, so the easiest way to remember when you use an IDP group or a Slack user group. So the IDP group will be that exists on the IDP side. The membership can only be managed in the IDP, whereas with the Slack user group, it's managed inside Slack. And then you can @mention the Slack user group. You can't @mention the IDP group. And whereas I can use the IDP group to push people into workspaces, I can use the Slack user group to add people to channels. If an org has multiple workspaces in enterprise, the best way to control access to each workspace is through IDP groups. I would say that's the best way to control who has access to which workspace for sure. If a company claims its email domain, does it automatically bring all existing workspaces? Yes, it brings those workspaces under the company's control. You'll have to go through the steps kind of outlined in that slide, where you have to enter the domain or a wildcard for that domain. And then the person that has set up that workspace does have to approve it, but it's a relatively straightforward process if you know who owns each workspace.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ali, for answering those. And I must say the audience is super active today. A lot of questions around. And thanks for answering all, Ali. And before wrapping it up, I just wanted to share that in order to claim your certification voucher, you need to just make sure that you're attending all bootcamp. I think so. We are already halfway down, and feel free to post your learnings on LinkedIn, tagging the hashtag Slack with the along with the speakers. And next two sessions we will be rolling out soon, so stay tuned on that part. And before closing it out, I again want to thank Ali for all your time You put up, it's late at your end, but still you manage, extremely, extremely honored to have you again. And thanks everyone for joining in. And I think so, Shanti, if you have any questions around, considering, it's late for Ali, you can always ping me or Ali. We are more than happy to help. Or any folk who are having questions further, please feel to message over LinkedIn. We are more than happy to assist.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a great day ahead. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Have a good day.